This is our last speaker, Illyoung Choi of CyVerse, University of Arizona, and he will be talking about iRODS Speaks SFTP, more ways to securely transfer your data. Take it away.
Hi, I am Illyoung from CyVerse. My talk today is about SFTP support for iRODS. There are science domains working with confidential data, such as medical and health science. Working on these science domains requires us to take care of data security. Data transfer and user authentication must be done very securely, and client software also should be well known and validated, so it shouldn't do bad things secretly. In addition to these security requirements, it is also important to provide ease of integration into existing research workflows. Some of the requirements can be satisfied by setting up iRODS to use SSL and PAM authentication. However, we wanted to add a new secure data access method that can provide better compatibility and usability to users without changing our existing iRODS system setup in CyVerse. We decided to use SFTP protocol. SFTP provides encrypted data transfer using SSH protocol internally. It also provides public key authentication, which is more powerful than normal password-based authentication. SFTP already has been used a lot in many systems and by many users. So there are a lot of well-known and validated clients, such as OS built-in SFTP client or CUR. Users who are not familiar with Linux terminal, they can use GUI-based clients such as FileZilla or CyberDuck. Users and administrators are already familiar with the SFTP protocol, so they don't need to learn new things. So that's a big gain. We implemented SFTP interface for iRODS using SFTP Go, which is an open source SFTP server written in pure Go. SFTP Go supports various backend storage, such as a local disk, S3, and Google Cloud storage. So we thought we can easily add iRODS supports to SFTP Go. That's why we chose SFTP Go. It also has a built-in defender that can filter users by their IP address range or block brute force login trials. SFTP Go also supports plain FTP protocol and SCP and WebDAV protocol. We already tested the SCP and it worked very well. We will compare its WebDAV performance as well in the future with DevRODS. SFTP Go can be easily integrated to other services by using its RESTful API and external authentication module. In the next slide, we will explain how we implemented iRODS integration using the external authentication module. We implemented 2 modules to integrate SFTP Go into iRODS. The first one is iRODS backend storage module here, which provides iRODS data access. The second one is iRODS external authentication module. This module allows users to log in SFTP Go with their iRODS credentials or public key. When there is a login attempt from a user, SFTP Go redirects the login request to iRODS external authentication module. If the login was with a password, then the module tries to log in using username and the password that the user input. If the login was with a public key, the module logs in to iRODS using a proxy authentication, then finds authorized key file under .ssh directory in the iRODS user's home directory, then compares the public keys listed in the file with user provided public key to find the match. Actually, the public key is extracted from private key the user gave. If the authentication is passed, then the module returns a JSON object that describes the user creation information and virtual folder mappings. So we map two virtual folder mappings, one for user home directory and the other for a community shared directory. Once the user is authenticated, then iRODS backend storage module is responsible for providing iRODS access. The module uses proxy authentication to establish iRODS connection and provide data access. In this way, SFTP Go does not store any user password here. The authorized key file is a simple text file. As you already know, the file contains a list of public keys, and it should be located in .ssh directory under your home directory in iRODS. There are three options implemented. One is expiry time, which is used to set an expiration time of the public key. And from is used to allow or deny clients by IP or IP ranges. Home option is used to override home directory. This is very useful when limiting data access permission per device over the same user. Here is an example. Red boxes highlights the spaces. Each public key is in a new line, but the options can be in front of the line, and they should be in a comma separated string without space. So yeah, you can add the options freely. I/O performance of iRODS backend module was just fine. The iRODS backend module in red was slower than local SSD backend, which is in blue. This is anticipated because the iRODS backend module needs to communicate with the remote iRODS server for data access. So that should be slower than local SSD. But considering this, I think this is a reasonable number and not that slow. We also compared SFTP Go for iRODS with other iRODS clients. SFTP Go showed a little reduced upload bandwidth compared to WebDAV and iCommands. In download, SFTP Go showed higher bandwidth than WebDAV. The bandwidth of iCommands for download was incomparably high since it uses parallel data transfer. But yeah, still SFTP Go isn't that slow. I think that's a reasonable number considering it encrypts the data fully. Here's a quick demo using password-based authentication. So we can use existing built-in SFTP command line tool. And then we can find two virtual folders. One is home folder and the other one is community shared directory. Yeah, we can access the file. We can easily download using get command inside SFTP. Yeah. So it showed 32 megabytes per second in our environment. Here's another demo using public key authentication. I already created an authorized key file at local, and then I uploaded it to iRODS server using iPut into the .ssh directory. Then log in using public key authentication. Because I already have a private key in my system, there's no password prompt here. We are trying to use SFTP Go for iRODS for our health science project and agriculture project. Of course, in health science project, we use encrypted data transfer, and we can integrate SFTP command line tool to existing workflows easily. In agriculture project, we use a bunch of Raspberry Pis for sensing environmental data and photos of plants. So we assign different public key of a single user, and different home. We set a different home directory per for each Raspberry Pi, so that they get isolated spaces. This is more secure than existing password-based access and sharing a common iRODS space between all devices. So this is very powerful. Currently, the SFTP Go for iRODS is in alpha release. The system is only accessible from UA network or via UA VPN. We plan to open beta release in August. In beta release, we will allow access from off-campus users as well. All source code and deployment scripts are already opened, so you can find them in our CyVerse GitHub repositories. To conclude, we developed a new SFTP service that runs on top of existing iRODS in CyVerse. This way, we provide more secure authentication and data access to iRODS. The public key authentication is implemented on top of iRODS proxy authentication. It is also it also supports 3 options that are very useful. We are trying to use SFTP service in our ongoing science projects. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
All right. Any questions for Illyoung? All right. Thanks, Illyoung.
Thank you.